Kayle is one of my favorite champions. I know, it's a bold statement, please put the pitchforks away and let me explain why. It's not because she's an annoying counterpick top lane because she's basically guaranteed to win late game, not because she has an updated design because of her rework, but finally, damn, look at those thighs. Nope. My reasons nowadays are most simply described as brand loyalty. She was the first champion I ever played, and back then it was entirely because a fully armored angel with a flaming sword sounded badass. I've played Kayle pretty consistently since then, and she still remains to be one of my favorites because of her inherent build diversity. Do you want to play her as an enchanter support? Kayle can build it. Do you want to build full on hit effects and turn her blades into a homegrown lawnmower service? Kayle can build it. Do you want to play her in the jungle? Why? Why would you ever? I mean, hell yeah, she can jungle. It's season 11. Anyone can jungle. But by far my favorite build on rework Kayle has to be my super secret full crit Kayle build hidden in the annals of history for years until I, the chosen one, uncovered it. And that build is... which, if I'm being honest with myself, is just an outdated Sivir build. Oh, hey, how'd that get there? One of the biggest problems that I had with Kayle after her rework was how slow she felt, though to explain the differences between Kayle before her rework and now, I've brought in a local expert who specializes in old clips featuring Sion in the bot lane. Take it away, Skooch.
Kayle used to be my favorite jungler in League of Legends, and for a lot of reasons that are lacking in her newer iteration. First off, her E used to be a toggle which turned her basic attacks into ranged autos for the next couple of seconds. When her attacks were ranged, it did an explosion around the target, which dealt damage to nearby enemies in a circle, which is cooler than that cone-shaped nonsense they got today because it used to teach enemies not to hold hands. And though new Kayle's E is an execute that does an AoE blast around her target, it just stands to me as Riot saying, remember when this angel used to be a literal god? Another genuine thing that I miss is that her E, aka her range, that genuinely defines her as a character, was available at level 1. Meaning that even in lane, she always had the ability to harass from a safe distance without fearing the idea of being jumped by this, or this, or this, or that. Ugh. Nowadays, though Kayle scales well, that rhymes, if you can manage to survive the earlier portions of the game, she still struggles a decent amount because until she's level 6, she has to practically play like a wet noodle. And besides that, putting her form upgrades behind EXP, a resource that you can't expedite in the same way you can gold, really locks this character into a side lane split pusher out for her final form instead of the snowballing angel of death she used to be. And though all of these are valid concerns, my biggest gripe with new Kayle is something that seems insignificant at first. Are you ready to hear it? Drum roll, please. Old Kayle used to be able to attack during her ultimate. Now let me explain why it matters. Kayle is, and has always been, a DPS champion, damage per second, and her power came from how high she was able to get that DPS. In Kayle's older iteration, she was able to build raw attack speed and ability power and hybrid damage items specifically to get her DPS to an insane amount, and she wouldn't have to worry too much about fights because she would be able to ultimate herself and stay immune for
2 to 3
seconds while also dealing as much damage as physically possible. This is how she got away with building the way she used to. But now, alongside her ultimate only being 3 seconds long, she channels the entire time, making it impossible for her to auto attack and quite literally negating her DPS. And what did Riot give us in return? Oh, a bit of AoE damage around the target. But funny story, the damage only happens at the end of the duration, and if Kayle is using this ability to save a target, chances are they're not tanky enough to want to be next to enemy champions when the invulnerability runs out. And the damage the swords do is nowhere near the amount of auto attacks that Kayle would be able to get off during its duration, which literally lowers your DPS for an ineffective burst that won't land the majority of the time. It's like owning a grenade that can only explode if it detects you within 2 feet of it. Who in the hell thought this was a good idea? Cause I know this rework didn't come from heaven. That's where angels come from, and they wouldn't do that to my baby Kayle. Take it back from here, Kai. I'ma go weep.
With new Kayle, you never scale aggressively enough to make it worth playing the champion before the 20-minute mark. Sure, Nashers into Riftmaker and then Rabadons or Lichbane may be the way to go nowadays and is the optimal way to play, but as a brand loyalist, I have this to say. That's boring as shit. Here's how my core build works. You bring Kayleforce because it's in the title of this video and because it does two things. 1, it gives Kayle, an immobile champion, a dash. 2, every time you build an item, it gives you more movement speed so you can make faster rotates around the map and split push more effectively. It also contributes to your mixed damage pool, because while your auto attacks hit for AD damage, Kayleforce itself is a magic damage execute. Essence Reaver second because mana is essential, the Sheen proc feels real nice, and cooldown reduction is always fun no matter whom you build it on. Stormrazor for the magic damage burst and the slow to help you stick to or kite around targets better. It also does that bonus burst damage to towers. And now you might be wondering, hold on, if Kayle always builds AP in her regular builds, then how and why does AD work? For starters, every ability that Kayle has, aside from her W heal, scales with AD. Secondly, Kayle is basically an ADC with built-in wave clear. Since she's an ADC with extra steps, that means that she scales really well with attack speed, and is the primary reason Nashor's Tooth has been a godly item on her since release. AD items offer plenty of attack speed alternatives, which you can find in this build in the form of Kayleforce and Stormrazor. Third, and by far what I consider to be the most overlooked aspect of all of this, Kayle's waves will crit based on Kayle's crit modifiers. So now not only do you hit hard with AD attacks, but you crit in magic damage as well as in a massive AoE. And the Kayleforce TM build now gives you a dash and bonus movement speed every time you complete an item. With items like these, ADCs are pretty weak, am I right, fellas? Honestly, the entire reason I came up with this build was because I'm bored of not playing lane for 20 minutes. Before, you had damage with a very broad timing window to get off an early game, meaning you could go toe-to-toe with most top laners. Now with the rework and the poor early game that Kayle has that contributes less to a game than the butterflies that fly above river at the start of a game, virtually every top lane matchup sucks. The only ones that don't are tanks with weak presence in lane, which none of them see play, so you're straight out of luck anyway. Right, runes, these are the ones that I run, but the secondaries don't matter. You can swap them for whichever one of these you like or need for your game. Fleet Footwork can also be traded out for PTA if you feel so inclined. I'm just bad at the game and use the healing and movement speed as a crutch. Start with Doran's Blade and Health Potion unless you're against one of these assholes, then start Doran's Shield. As far as rounding out the build goes, Bloodthirster, Runeans, Rapid Fire Cannon, Infinity Edge, all of these items work great in this build if the game goes on for long enough. Berserker's Greaves because what else are you gonna buy? Mercury's Treads? Come on, we all know that Tenacity is an imaginary stat. Now this build may work in theory, but it's not optimal. It's not even good. But it's fun, it scales earlier than regular Kayle builds, and you should definitely try it out. Besides, what is League of Legends without someone running it down in your ranked games with an off-meta build that they found on YouTube? And that is all for this video. I'd like to thank Skooch for taking the time to feature in this video. You should go check out Can We Talk About This Kayle on his channel. I feature in there, and it's probably a much better video than what I have here. But that's all I got. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe if you want to, and also look at these subscriber statistics. Holy fuck.